Hello everyone, this is Mark Harrell, Senior Pastor of Forest Hills Baptist Church. Thank you again for joining me. I hope your Thanksgiving holiday went well. And as I thought about the holiday and what's going on, and I'm sure many of you had to change some traditions because of the pandemic and wanting to be safe. Well, in the book of Habakkuk, there's a situation that's being described here with Habakkuk complaining to God about a certain situation in Judah, and he's not getting the answer that he wants. So today's topic is not the answer I was looking for. Sometimes we feel that God is not fulfilling His promises or maybe even answering our prayers. There are times when you believe God is just not hearing you. In other words, He's turned His face away from you. Habakkuk is having this dialogue actually with God in the book of Habakkuk. Now you won't find this type of book anywhere in the Old Testament where it's dedicated to just a dialogue between the prophet and God. So just like you or me, in troubling times, Habakkuk didn't think God was hearing him. He was pleading with him over the wicked days and what was going on in Judah. And in this verse here in Habakkuk 1 and 2, he cries twice here in this verse. In the Hebrew for cry, you're going to notice, is different with each word that's being used. So the scripture says, "O Lord, how long shall I cry for help, and you will not hear? Or cry to you violence, and you will not save." So in this first word used, cry cry for help, is almost like a child asking for help. I need something. But the second use of cry in the Hebrew is almost I am now shouting. I'm shouting at God. The word actually means to shriek. So you can imagine this prophet now shouting at God about why hasn't He answered him. You know, some people keep crying out to God to answer them, to answer their prayer, to answer a question. Why have you done this? Why have you allowed this? Let me remind you, sometimes it's better for God to be silent than for us to know the answer. Because the answer may not be what we were looking for. When Habakkuk heard the answer, it was as if God said, you think things are bad now, they're getting ready to get worse. God is going to use the most wicked nation on earth at that time, the Chaldeans, and He is going to use these wicked people to bring judgment upon His chosen people. If redemption is the thread that links Genesis to Revelation, faith has to be the means to that redemptive end. Standing between Abraham's act of faith in Genesis 15:6 and Paul's identifying as how we're to be saved in Ephesians 2:8 through 9 is a statement also by God to the prophet Habakkuk. But the just shall live by faith. Chapter 2, verse 4. Habakkuk's prophecy is unique in the Old Testament where we're having this record of this dialogue that's going on between God and the prophet. Now I wonder if we had a record of our dialogue with God, what would it be like? Would we really be any different than Habakkuk? When we think about crying out to God, wanting an answer. Now, he was a resident of Judah, and he was frustrated that God was not acting to judge the sins of the nation. So here he is making this observation of his people, asking God to bring judgment. Notice that in the text in chapter 1, verse 1. O Lord, how long shall I cry? Will you not hear? Who hasn't wondered why God allows the wicked to prosper and the righteous to suffer? I'm sure we've all have asked that question. God's answer to Habakkuk was the same as his answer to Abraham and Paul, and a works-oriented monk named Martin Luther in the 16th century in Germany. The just shall live by faith. Luther's insight from Romans 1:17, which is really a quotation from Habakkuk 2:4, sparked the Protestant Reformation. He suddenly realized that faith and faithfulness is the way to live. God used the king of Babylon as an example of how not to live when replying to Habakkuk. So in chapter 1, verse 13, you who are purer eyes than see evil and cannot look at wrong, why do you idly look at traitors and remain silent when the wicked swallows up the man more righteous than he? Have you ever said, God, why is this happening to me or us? And maybe thinking, I'm not that bad. I'm not as bad as my neighbor. Or the reason that the United States is a Christian nation is because we're not as bad as another nation. That's almost thinking like how Congress does its math. In other words, let's say they said, we have a project, it's going to take $30 million. And the citizens look at this and say, how can that be $30 million? And they go, but realize we saved you 30 because we were going to spend 60. So sometimes that's how we look at our own sin. We're not as bad as someone else. As if we're expecting God to give us credit for not being as bad. The king lived by pride. And God was trying to tell him, but the just shall live by faith. Not by works, not in pride in yourself. If you look at Habakkuk 2:8, when God answers, he says, because you have plundered many nations, the remnant of the peoples shall plunder you. Now, when I read that, I thought about the statement, what goes around comes around. Or in Galatians 6:7, when it says, as you sow, you shall also reap. So God is telling Habakkuk, trust me, I see the wicked in Judah, and I will act. But until I do, you must trust me. That message was also to Abraham. He says, you will have a son, trust me. The message to Paul, believe me when I say your works cannot save you. The message to Martin Luther, you will only find peace with me when you substitute faith for your strivings or your works. In chapter 3, verses 16 through 19, he states, I hear and my body trembles. My lips quiver at the sound. Rottenness enters into my bones. My legs tremble beneath me. Yet I will quietly wait for the day of trouble to come upon people who invade us. Though the fig tree shall not blossom, nor fruit be on the vines, the produce of the olive fail, and the fields yield no food. The flock be cut off from the fold, and there be no herd in the stalls. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will take joy in the God of my salvation. God, the Lord, is my strength. He makes my feet like the deer's. He makes me tread on my high places. To the choir master with string instruments. In other words, he wants him to write this as a hymn to be sung. Now, there's something in the medical realm we call somatization. And what happens is when you take on a severe emotion, it will bring out a physical ailment, a symptom. And when Habakkuk is saying that I tremble, my whole body trembles. My lips tremble. They quiver. My legs, in other words, my knees are knocking. My legs are trembling. The news that something worse is going to happen than what's happening right now, Habakkuk. Now, you could imagine being the prophet of God receiving this word for the first time, anticipating that you were not expecting that answer. I'm sure Habakkuk was saying, come get them, Lord. Bring judgment on them, Lord. And when God says, I'm going to bring judgment, I'm going to use the most wicked nation on the earth to do it. But yet Habakkuk says, I will take joy in the God of my salvation. He says, yet I will rejoice in the Lord, even in this bad news, even in the answer he was not expecting. You know, this phrase, I will take joy in the God of my salvation, literally means that he was so excited that he was spinning in joy, physically rotating. And I can imagine our Baptists right now in the sanctuary spinning for joy of the God of their salvation. But that's what he's talking about. Now, how can he do this receiving the news he just got? So no matter the life's events, Habakkuk teaches us to rejoice in the Lord. And the message to all who ask, why? Why, Lord? How long, Lord? The answer always will be the same. Trust me. God is saying, just trust me. And sometimes you may say, Lord, I'm sorry I asked why or how long or what's going to happen, because like Habakkuk, you might get the answer you were not expecting. But hopefully, like Habakkuk, we can learn to rejoice in the Lord no matter what our status. I'm not trying to say that things are going to get worse. We need to understand that it always can be worse than it is. So let's learn from this small book of 3 chapters and rejoice in the Lord anyway and trust Him with all that we have. Thank you again for joining me, and God bless you.